and I should like to thank all the team of the Abu Dhabi Department of Antiquities for first inviting me, but also for having invited me so many times since the 80s. Yeah. So actually, I have been invited by Tim and Peter to study this Iron Age pottery, and of course I could not see all the materials they have been keeping in the store, but we made a selection of 1,491 potsherds, which included 252 rim shapes. This pottery has been sorted and studied owing to a methodology I have developed for several years on different Iron Age sites such as Rumeila, Ili 17, Bida bin Saud, Al Madam, Rafak, Hassan Badab, etc. Diagnostic fragments have been numbered, described in an inventory, which I left to the Department of Antiquity, and some of them were photographed and drawn. There were clearly, among the different layers that I have studied, there were clearly three different groups. One first group dated from probably the Iron Age II period, which is characterizing the layers located in the lower horizon, and over it, in the medial horizon, two successive groups of pottery. The first one was represented by a clear Iron Age III context. The second one was a mixing, including Iron Age II, Iron Age III, late pre-Islamic, and a few Islamic potsherds. This potsherd I show you is coming from one of the lowest level of the lower horizon, phase 3, and I show it to you because it looks like a lot the materials that we have been excavating and that we found in Mazafi 5. And this is the first time such a pottery is found so far away from Mazafi 5. We are actually in course of identification of this kind of pottery in the Emirates. We saw it on several sites dated from the late Bronze Age, Iron Age 1 in the northern Emirates. This kind of material is actually under study by Maria Paola Pellegrino, but I was very happy to find it in such a low layer, and I've been wondering if those low layer could not be dated at least at the very beginning of Iron Age II, from a time when this pottery was still in production and circulation in Southeast Arabia. It is associated already at that moment with sandy buffware, and this sandy buffware appears in very large quantity in all the layers of the lower horizon, and even upper, by the way. It's a buff to yellowish pottery with a red to black slip. It's sometimes very, very frequent in the layers, and this pottery is also more or less famous in all this Eastern Arabia. It's a pottery that is very, very, very abundant in al-Ain area, but which also exists in smaller quantity on other sides. And this pottery probably has been exported from the Rumeila, from the al-Ain region to other places. It was probably made in a site that was excavated in the Department of Antiquities in Ili 17, where some worsters have been found and where some samples could be analyzed on one side by me and Sophie Méry, who made a very nice petrographic study, and on the other side by Peter McGee and his team. Together with this sandy buffware, which is probably of local origin, we have a certain number of common arrangeware which represent an heterogeneous group of potteries, including at least 2, but probably more groups of ware, and for which I cannot propose any precise origin, but we find these kinds of pottery more commonly, not only along the foothills, but especially also in the mountains. The one in the lower pictures are, to me, quite close to the ones I have in Mazafi. The one in the upper pictures are more widely spread on different sites from Sarok al-Hadid until Mazafi. The Ornish pottery in sandy buff ware or common orange ware has a certain number of shapes, which is relatively standard, including whole-mouth jars, neck jars, large open vessels, bowls, and small carinated bowls. And the distribution of this kind of shapes, I have been comparing it to the one I found during my PhD a long time ago in different areas. It's the distribution of type of vessels matches quite well with House A in Rumeila or vicinity of a well in Almadam, with areas that are located in villages or in agricultural places, and is quite distinct from a fortress or that are like Lisk or Hassan Madab, which include a larger number of jars. The pottery also includes fine red painted ware with designs of stars inside, or I mean, this is a very common design we have on this kind of pottery throughout Southeast Arabia. A pottery that we find with quite good parallels from Bahrain to Salut on a very large area. Actually, its origin is not clearly known. There are several hypotheses have been proposed. My favorite one would be that this pottery would originate from central Oman. But further study has to be made about it. It has already been partly published by Sophie Marie and I, and by Peter McGee. There is also in Bin Ati this common orange ware with a whitish surface and the red painted decoration, which is another kind of painted pottery which has a quite large distribution in the Emirates and which can be met in Rumeila, Rafaq, Mazafi, Sarok al-Hadid, several places. It could be not homogeneous. It represents another group to be studied and to be understood. There are also a very few pockets of greyware. This greyware is wheel-made. It can be made and simply wheel-made and made, or it can be also burnished or polished. We have here only 1 or 2 fragments of rim, but I have been relating this group of ware to a group of greywares appearing in small quantity on different RNH sites. This ware is very interesting because it is quite scarce in a private house, private settlement area, but whereas it seems to concentrate in the graves located along the eastern coast and in the mountains, but also appears in quite high quantity in the Spanish excavation in Sarok al-Hadid. My first idea, it's an idea that will be worked on this later, is that it might be an imported vessel, maybe from Iran. We have to study it further. I should like to show you this piece, which is made also in a greyware, and which is obviously the head of a lion, or an animal close to the lion, and which for me is clearly of non-local inspiration. Actually, I don't have any equivalent anywhere, so I cannot propose a precise origin for this element. The only thing that I can point out is that this kind of piece can be found in a garden area in al-Ain, which is something very, very strange to think about. And Actually, we have to look for further parallels, but I think it was probably an imported piece. Above this different layers representing the lower horizon, we had two layers, including the very famous burnished maroon slipped ware and fine orange wares, which are two characteristic vessels from the Iron Age 3 period that have been documented at Rumeila, at Rafak, but also in Tel Abrak and Al Madam and in several places in the Oman Peninsula. These vessels are very standard for their shaping, but they present different kind of wear, and I think it's a stylistic group, which means that probably we have some local-made vessels and some possible imported vessels originating maybe from Bahrain, from Iran, those kinds of areas. And over those two layers of including Ornish pottery, we have a layer with a very mixed material, among which I could recognize a few fragments that might be related to late pre-Islamic period. They are very fragmented, they are very small, so of course our degree of viability, of confidency is less high. Those two fragments of possible sandy orange ware with bitumen inside, which made me think to some wares we had in Mleha, where these pottery were represented by torpedo jars and jars with two handles. And in this layer are also some thick gray and thinner gray ware, which might be related to the gray and black ware that also appeared during the late pre-Islamic period in Mleha. This ware is continuing during the early Islamic period also in Kush. It's almost finished. Sorry. We have finally a few glazed ware, which also recall some late pre-Islamic glazed ware, possibly coming from Mesopotamia. So, as a conclusion, all the activities that has been studied by Peter Sheehan and Tim Power fit well into the Iron Age 2, but they could well begin at the very beginning of Iron Age 2, maybe during the Iron Age 1, which gives us an image of the possible beginning of this agricultural landscape. And this is a period where we notice a sort of development of farming practices and possibly of irrigation techniques with a shifting from well to falhaj. This is followed by this industrial activity, which is also happening during the Iron Age 2. The small holes, that the structures were interpreted as possible structures associated with the separation of copper ores from their containing deposit. This has to be studied more, but it's a possible idea. And this is covered by new layers of agricultural activities, which are something different in terms of scale and technique. These are more, this kind of activity could be an agricultural activity on a different scale, on a smaller scale. Of course, our data are too limited to be sure of it, but this is very interesting because this has been made me thinking to the fact that we have, at the end of Iron Age 2, beginning of possible difficulties encountered by several communities, and I've been wondering if this could be inserted in that frame. And finally, I should like to simply remember that this site was absolutely not visible from the surface. And that's the example of this rescue excavation is a perfect example showing that we need, I mean, the local authority need to continue developing this kind of archaeological evaluation and intervention to have a better idea of complete archaeological landscapes, which are also part of the society besides the settlements and graves and built areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much.